This is Fam Electric Ghost, and welcome Forest Hills, a New York City indie rock band, to the program. We've been doing this podcast since 2018, and we interview indie artists from around the world, and now we're interviewing Forest Hills from New York City. So it's great to have you guys on the show. You guys got the questions I sent you, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. So we're going to run through that, and then we'll kind of have the discussion open up from there. So usually I ask all the bands I talk to, and both of you can answer this in whatever order you want to. Like, when did you first get into music, at what age? Whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Zero, by the way. I do the vocals and everything except the drums in the band. But I've always sort of been creative at heart. I've been singing since I was able to speak. I really started writing and picking up instruments when I was about 12 years old, but I've always been involved in music in some way or another. What about you, Jack?
Yeah, my name is Jack. I do all the drums. I started with classical piano when I was around like 7, and then I picked up drums when I was a young teenager, around 13, 14, and then just once I learned the basics, I started gigging and playing and just perfecting the art of drumming to music, really.
That's cool. So, Zero, who do you play? What instruments do you play besides vocals?
So I'm capable of playing guitar, bass, piano, ukulele, and drums, but I do everything in our band except the drums. So anything that you hear that's not drums is me.
That's you. So you're on the keyboard too. Like, I'm a keyboardist, so I'm always
Yeah.
interested. I'll ask you about some of that later.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've been working on music, both of you, since you were young. Since you guys both kind of picked it up in your, before you even when you were teens, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did it at 12, and you started learning piano at what?
Yeah, I was like 7 years old, like
7.
when I first started going to school.
14, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because a lot of the musicians I've talked to maybe 40 musicians in the last 2 years, and most of the time I've talked to, maybe only a couple, maybe like a handful, who hadn't been playing since they were like under, when they were very young or in their teenage years. It seems like musicians are kind of born.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. or artists or people who are creatives seem to, and I get drawn to creative people. I talk to singer-songwriters mostly.
Sure.
So that's very interesting. So if you're talking about, like, in terms of getting into bands, how long you've been working on music within like the indie scene? When did you start doing that?
For me, I started looking into bands right around age 13. I got into my first band. Forest Hills only formed in October of 2018. So our band's only almost almost 2 years old at this point. What about you?
Yeah, I started really as soon as I could drive my drum kit around. So I didn't start really working with bands until I was 16. And then I really started pursuing it more when I moved to Vegas when I was 20, and I really started like looking for bands to play gigs with and write music with.
That's interesting. So as a drummer, I had that when I was in my teens. I was a keyboard player. My brother was a guitar player, and we were always looking for drummers that had cars.
Yep.
to come over our house, and we'd feed them and say, hey, we'll buy you a pizza, we'll buy you some beer or something. Like, get to the house and let's jam. And so we were always trying to find a guy that had a car. And eventually we got a car. We had a station wagon, so we were able to go get drummers.
Station wagons are great for drums.
Yeah. We had a big old like fake wood paneled like Chrysler, and he's like, oh, we can get all your drums into this thing. We'll go get you.
Yep. I've turned down many vehicles because my drums wouldn't fit in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big boat, like as big as an SUV. So you realized you had a talent for music early. And so at what age did you actually start writing your own material? Were you playing other people's music? Were you, taking your favorite bands and trying to, be cover bands, or did you actually start writing your own music?
I started writing music when I was 12, and I never wanted to be a cover artist. I started completely with my own original material. Obviously, as I was learning instruments, I did learn a couple cover tunes just for the sake of learning the instrument. But once I kind of got my footing and got my grounding, I never learned another cover after that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is that the same thing with you,
Yes and no. I had so much experience playing piano that technically I learned hundreds of
Yeah,
songs by
yeah,
ear. I learned how to play like classical music. When I started playing drums, I very specifically told my drum teacher that I wanted to learn how to play drums. I didn't necessarily want to learn how to play a certain song. So that's kind of where my creativeness
yeah.
started, was with drumming. And then the first settings I actually learned to play drums in with other people was with church music and like worship music. So I technically had to learn cover songs for that.
Right.
But even then, I very quickly realized that I wanted to be composing and writing my own drum parts. So whenever I'd look for bands, I would always look for bands that would let me actually dig my teeth in to the songs
Right
as
up
who
for you.
I was, rather than just listening to past recordings.
So, as a drummer, who are your like reference points? Who are your favorite drummers that like in the rock or indie history?
I really don't have any specific ones. If I hear something that I like, I try to kind of take just that one idea from any of the other drummers that I listen to.
Mhm.
So sometimes I won't even know who the drummer is. I'll just hear something that I like in a song, and then I'll take that one idea and apply it to what I do. I've never really wanted to be another drummer. I've always wanted to perfect my own art. So I've never really tried to emulate what other people do, honestly.
Well, that's interesting because like you talk to drummers, and in my day, because I'm in my 50s, like everybody was like, "Oh, John Bonham, oh, Mitch Mitchell, or Keith Moon." They were always looking at those guys,
Yeah.
or looking at like Ringo, or looking at the Motown drummers just because of their technical capabilities. If you go back and you look at like soul bands like the Temptations and the Four Tops and Impressions, there's something about some of the Motown drummers had really awesome technique, or even you get to like Coltrane or Sun Ra, jazz musicians have very specific skill sets.
Yeah, and I do tend to lean more towards the jazz. So the more Keith Moon, the Ginger Baker, people tend to relate my drumming to those types of artists, that's for sure.
Yeah, I did hear like I loved the Keith Moon because he pretty much like solos through the whole almost every Who album, and it ends up being dun 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 in different ways.
Yep.
but it's just so emphatic and so kind of had a punk aesthetic that I really was always like, oh, I need to bring that into my music. Even though I'm an electronic musician, I always try to bring kind of jazz capabilities into what I'm doing. But that's interesting to hear where you're coming from. So on your vocal side, Zero,
Sure.
who are your reference points, or even because you play all the musicians, maybe you can talk about your heroes, your reference points, or people that you get influenced by.
Yeah, I mean, definitely similar answer as Jack. Obviously, I'm going to be inherently influenced by what I listen to just because rock and metal are my favorite genres, but I always specifically tried not to have a hero or an icon because at that point, if you're saying, I love this person and I want to sound like them, you're not being unique. You're just being a variation of an artist that already exists. So if you want to create music that's truly unique or that's new, you can't really afford to have specific influences. So I purposefully try not to have them for any instruments that I play.
Well, that's interesting. So you're the first musician I've actually heard say that. That's really cool though. That's a different way to look at it. Um, yeah, because I mean, a lot of musicians, in my day, were all trying to be like the big bands
Mm-hmm.
from the time. Everybody's trying to emulate, Zeppelin or the Doors or something. Not that we wanted to be them, and I always tried to have my own voice, but we were just kind of like, in awe of them. And not, I knew a lot of guys that never would go pick up the guitar again if they couldn't get close to where they wanted to be,
Sure.
which I think sometimes that is a problem. It's good to have your attitude or your sensibility, because then you'll think that you can't be in the game if you're always comparing yourself to somebody else instead of just accepting your own capabilities and trying to do your own voice.
Exactly. If you're just trying to be like someone else, you're refuting the potential person that you could be. You can make such amazing things, but if you're so focused on sounding like what's out there or being as good as somebody else, you're never going to get there because you're completely missing the uniqueness that you may have as a musician.
And that's what I kind of loved about like the Who, because they had this punk aesthetic, even though it was this big rock band. And then I was drawn in the whole punk era to bands like the Ramones, CBGB's, like the early Talking Heads, bands like Husker Du, Black Flag, a lot of bands that were the whole idea that you didn't have to have Robert Plant's voice.
Sure.
You could be like Johnny Rotten. You could be Joe Strummer. You could come out there like the Ramones, and you could just be honest, and you could say whatever you wanted. And the interesting thing that happened again with Kurt Cobain and grunge, and I kind of slide into that because in your band I hear a lot of the grunge era. I do hear like a punk aesthetic that seems to be kind of. I kind of hear a lot of PJ Harvey, Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, that Wild Flag, that type of sound.
Yeah, we definitely do get compared a lot to bands from the 90s and like early 2000s. And it's really funny because people will often mash together like at least 3 to 5 different bands. And it's a compliment. I take it as a compliment, but it's also like at a certain point when you're having to mash so many things together, at what point does it become its own new thing?
Well, it's your own thing. Some people have to, they relate to like,
for sure.
I talk to other bands, so I kind of have to kind of pin you down into a genre. That a lot of people don't want to be genre. I mean, I'm genreless myself. That's what I call what I do expansive sound, because that's kind of, it means all genres.
Yeah.
It means like you take jazz, you take rock, you take punk, you take progressive rock, and you mix it all together, and you kind of get it. And that's kind of where you guys are. I hear a lot of progressive rock type of stuff. I hear punk, I hear indie, I hear classic rock. I hear a lot of things. So you can pin it down, or you can say, well, you're actually doing something new.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with being labeled in a genre, because, people are going to be looking for you depending on what they already like. It's more just if you say, okay, we're an alt rock band, and then you suddenly say, oh, I have to do my guitar this way because we're alt rock. Once you start limiting your creativity because of the label, that's when there's a problem.
Well, I think the great thing about today is you see a lot of the genre bending bands.
Absolutely.
You see a lot of groups, they mix hip hop aesthetics, and even hip hop bands cross into hard rock and jazz, and actually, hip hop artists have full bands behind them now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're not just doing samples. So there's a merging of, classic soul. You get a guy like Earl Sweatshirt's doing beat poetry with jazz and, really lo-fi old 70s soul samples, and, stuff that's not obvious, stuff that's more indie, and more, out there, more progressive in a way.
Sure.
And I hear that's why I like talking to artists that actually are still playing instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Few and far between sometimes these days.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's very hard because, as an electronic musician, people forget, well, I'm an old school kind of electronic musician. I play Modes.
Mm-hmm.
I play Prophets. I play Jupiter 8s, SH5s and stuff. So I'm into analog and modular. And when somebody hears electronic, they think you got a CDJ and you're a DJ.
Right.
And so, I get a little offended because, I come to the sound check and I've got a road case full of Rolands and Modes, and they're like, well, where's your SD card? I'm like,
Yeah.
I got a sound check just like you guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, how come you just can't use a CDJ with it? Because I'm actually going to play.
Yeah.
Not that that's bad. And I've worked with, guys who are, DJs, and I've worked with hip hop guys. It's a different thing. It's a different type of music. But there, I think there has to be respect for people who actually still play their instrument.
Absolutely.
Because it's a different experience. It's not that you can say one is worse than the other. You can mix the genre. You can I've worked with hip hop guys. I've worked with DJs, and you can do some cool stuff, and you can get new ideas from what they're doing. But I just don't like it being lost. The kind of art of what you're doing kind of goes back to the whole history of doing music.
Right.
It's actually playing and singing, and not just doing samples. So when you guys write, do you use like the tools? Everybody uses a DAW today. Everybody uses digital audio workstations. Or do you go into a studio and work with a recording engineer, and do you do that work at home on a DAW, or do you only do it in the studio?
We own our own studio. It's not a home studio. It's a studio space. We're self-recorded, self-produced. We mix ourselves, master, etc. I do record using a DAW, of course, but when I'm writing songs, I just have my acoustic guitar and my songbook open and I write.
That's cool. Well, yeah, I'm kind of an old school guy. I used to use Tascam analog 4-track and 8-track machines, and I kind of made myself not use DAWs. I just use hardware recorders.
Sure.
Because it kind of forces me to go back when I had my reel-to-reel And I think you just do your songcraft in a different way. If you don't have all these tools to like easily correct things, then you have to actually craft your song. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
I definitely do the same thing when I'm recording. Like if I'm doing a guitar take and I mess up, I don't edit it. I just redo the whole. It doesn't matter if it was on the last line of the song. I do the whole take over again. So I definitely also prefer recording and crafting that way.
Yeah, I mean, so many people, I understand, ever since Pro Tools came along, that you can kind of take everything you do and fix it
Sure.
and not necessarily go back and do 50 takes to get it right. That you can actually, take everything you do and kind of just fix it. But I think it kind of takes away that craft that used to see from, the guys I used to love, the guys I still love, like, yes, and Genesis, Peter Gabriel, these guys would go and just, hammer it out.
Yeah, I mean, we
And
take modern technology like the DAWs and the ability to visually see all the files at once. We take that, but then we still use it like it's a tape machine.
Yeah.
Like we'll do take after take until we get a good one. We'll save that good one. We'll keep doing a few more takes to see if we can get a better take. And like with drums, normally they're a one take across, and then occasionally I'll get maybe an intro that it feels and sounds amazing. So I'll just put that intro in there. Or I'll take that bridge and just take that bridge, but we really try to keep the editing limited. And if we start seeing ourselves cutting and editing too much, we'll just do it again.
No, I mean, if a take has chemistry, that's one thing, but at a certain point, if you're editing so much, you're kind of losing the fact that you're able to just play the song the full way through. Like, I feel like all this editing kind of means that you don't actually have to be able to play your instrument. You just sort of have to be able to get something right at some point and just cut and paste it in there. And you lose the artistry.
Yeah. Well, I think what you get today is there are musicians and there are producers.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the producers, you could say they're musicians. I would say they're artists, but they're not the same as like a studio musician or a core musician like you guys.
Right.
Or because it's not that they're not an artist, but they use that technology and they can craft it, and it opens the door that maybe years ago they could have never wrote a song.
Right.
Because the technology wouldn't allow them to do it. And now the technology allows somebody that has the drive to write a song, but maybe not the technical capability of playing the song, to actually become an artist.
Absolutely. I think that's a great thing. That's just not
well,
how
and you get there's a
goes.
lot of producers too that actually they're great artists, and that's why they're able to fix bands will come to them and not be able to play the songs how they're supposed to be able to, and then the producers will take them and actually do them properly. So it's crazy. It goes both ways. So that's
guys
show up and bands can't play the music.
Guys that went to Berkeley and they're musical directors, and they had bands, but the bands weren't as successful, or they're not in the band anymore.
Sure.
You get like a guy like a Todd Rundgren. He's a great producer and he's done tons of work, and he's a great musician and producer, and he does tons of musical direction for tons of other people. And you just, you get to the point where, they can take a band that had something and then fix it. There was a story where Todd Rundgren worked with like Alex Chilton. And I would say Alex Chilton's like a genius from Big Star, but he actually crafted his stuff a little tighter than what he was doing.
Sure.
And it's just that, great musician. To me, he's a great singer, but you can always use a producer to help you, no matter what your skill set.
Absolutely.
Like a Lennon McCartney, and he can see. I mean, they're great musicians, but if you see what they get, the production, come in and get the fifth Beatle, and you get this whole other thing. So So what DAW do you use? Because I always try to pin it down and see what kind of technology people are using.
For drums, I normally use Logic for creating and doing some mixing, and then I'm going to be using Pro Tools in the future for some mixing and mastering, but normally it's Logic 10.
Yeah, we've used all kinds of software. I've even used GarageBand a lot. For what we're doing, it works.
Yeah, it captures the audio.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people, the Gorillaz used like GarageBand on an album.
Yeah.
I've seen people use their cell phones and just use a voice memo recorder and then bring it into a full board, because sometimes you can take something lo-fi. It's like, taking a field recording and then using it on an album. You can do anything you want. You could, Jack White takes a plastic $50 guitar.
Sure.
It doesn't really matter if you've got the talent. You can take anything and make it sound good.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what kind of sound you're looking for.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people, that are analog purists, or they want an analog studio, or they want a digital studio, or they only want to use samples, or they want to use softs. I mean, to me, there's no right or wrong. It's kind of whatever serves the song.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of an analog purist. I like to use Moogs. If I'm going to use a bass, that synth bass, I'm probably going to use my Moog. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't use a soft synth if I found something I liked.
Exactly.
It's kind of like whatever serves the song. Yeah, one day I might use, some kind of plugin, and the other day I might use a Prophet 5 because I think that's the only thing that's going to work.
For sure.
So when you guys, because you have your own studio, you guys can record whenever you want. You don't have to worry about having to pay for studio time, right?
Yeah, no, 24/7 access. It's our own private studio. We just pay monthly rent, so it's ours.
Yeah.
That's awesome. If you're creative, and you guys have that much, going on where you have that kind of access, do you actually work with other bands, and actually become producers for other bands since you have the studio?
We may look into doing that in the future, but right now the current space that we have really only fits us. It's a little bit smaller. I mean, I'm sure New York City real estate is.
Yeah. I know how big it was.
Yeah. So maybe in the future, but not currently.
Yeah, I'm in New Hampshire. It's a whole different thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, space doesn't cost as much out here.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. But you've got access to a lot of people, a lot of talent, a lot of artists around.
For sure.
Yeah, that's cool being in that scene. So when you guys have been a band, how long have you been playing the clubs in New York? And then, how far outside of New York have you actually done shows?
We don't really do the club scene. Our first show was actually in Los Angeles at the Whiskey A Go Go, which is a huge venue out there. We opened up for the band Orgy.
That's an awesome venue.
Yeah, and then since then, our most recent show before coronavirus kicked in was at the Nest in Brooklyn. It's a little bit smaller, but we generally try to stay away from like just dive bars and clubs and stuff. We usually go for more concert venue places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the Whiskey A Go Go, or would that CBGB place you would go if they're still?
I would love
that. That would be great if they were still around.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, place to see. New York, I've played in some small places in New York as the Ghost, and I just like the New York crowd because I was, if I'm in New Hampshire, I got a real problem playing new music.
Sure.
They only want to hear folk music if it's new. So I'm electronic, so I don't really fit my area.
Right.
So when I come to New York, I can actually play brand new tunes, and people want to hear it.
Yeah.
But where I come from, I can't do that.
Right. New York has so much culture and so much diversity that any kind of music you want to do, there's so much talent, but everyone wants to hear something. Yeah. Everyone wants to see a show.
Yeah, that's one I take the 5 hours to get 6 hours to get there. That's worthwhile for all the bands that are out here. We've been trying to get a scene, but the only scene that really works in New Hampshire is kind of folky scene. If
sure.
you sound like Neil Young or Brett or something, or America, you'll do okay. So have you thought of doing collabs with other artists, like when I was talking about like hip hop or other genres that would interest you?
Yeah, I mean, we'd definitely be open to doing collaborations in the future. We actually do incorporate a lot of other genres into our music. Like I rap in a lot of our songs. There's screaming, there's gothic vocals, there's like progressive guitars. We have a lot of different stuff coming into our sound already. So, I mean, at this point in time, I'm not really sure what adding in another artist would really do because there are already so many sounds going on, but never say never. I'd be more than willing to talk to someone who wants to collaborate for sure.
Well, this seems like a thing within the labels and within the kind of like, music scene that, I was on a label one time. I got on a label and they're always trying to get features, right?
Yeah.
They're always trying to bring, and sometimes they would try to bring people to fit. And I would be like, no.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, it's kind of like as an artist, do you want to maintain a certain sound, or do you want to try to open up to different audiences and maybe that kind of changes your sound and you're willing to kind of accept it? it's
Yeah.
you have to kind of make a decision which way you want to go.
For sure. Yeah. Our band, I mean, like I said before, we don't really care what we're labeled as. We just make the music that we want to make. But that's a big reason why whenever we play shows, we make sure that there's a wide variety in the sounds that are coming. Like, we like it when the bands that come on before and after us sound very different from us. You know, we don't mind if we're the heaviest rock band playing with a show with a hip hop artist, a pop artist, because that's great. You know, people like all kinds of music. And when every band during a show sounds the same, it's not very interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of, if you get to the trance crowd, you know, or the like techno crowd, you know, sometimes some of the EDM clubs are very limiting.
Right.
If you're an electronic musician and you're more modular or more progressive, where your background came from like Genesis or, you know, or Tangerine, you know, Dream, it's kind of limiting if you're only with a bunch of guys that just want to keep on doing the drop.
Exactly.
It's like, come on.
Yeah.
You know, you know, it's not exciting. I think the festival scene in Europe, in Asia, is very interesting. I just signed up with a promoter that can actually get me out there, and then
Nice.
coronavirus happened.
Right, right.
So I finally got a booker that was willing to pay my way, pay for my hotel, do everything, and said they were going to set me up. I get the booker, and then this thing happens. I'm like, great. It's like,
Wow.
so I have a booking agency, and I can't get any shows because there's no shows.
It'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah. But you know, it's just the way things go. But it's just cool to have it. But
For
yeah,
sure.
I find that. Are you guys willing to go and do the festival scene? Like, if it opened up after this thing goes away, and we get vaccines and antivirals and everything, and clubs start opening, would you be up for playing outside the U.S.?
Yeah, we would love to. We're actually looking into doing a national US tour within a year after everything kind of opens back up. And then I think international within the next 5 years for sure.
Yeah, we've been getting quite a bit of attention from like the UK and places that are, there's a lot of people that are interested
at the rate that we're
our
growing.
music.
Yeah.
Yeah, the UK, I think this the whole, you know, the scene in the UK, you know, the whole history, you know, Hendrix had to go to London to get found.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of that thing, you know, that a lot of jazz bands had to go to London, you know, had to go to Paris, had to go to Berlin,
Right.
just because the European audience is so more accepting, you know, just like New York is, but Europe overall is very accepting of new music and
Sure.
musicians, and they're very supportive of musicians. So I think that's always been a big drive. And even I actually lived in Tokyo for 2 years in 2004, and the Japanese musical audiences are very eclectic. They love everything.
Yeah.
And you can just Tokyo is such an awesome place. I mean, that is a place that if you ever get to play there, that is like, it is a total, you know, unbelievable experience. Yeah, I think the opening up to the whole world as a musician, that you have to be willing to like see wherever you can go.
Absolutely.
So in terms of your experience with the music industry and what's going on with Corona right now, what are your opinions of like streaming services and opportunities for musicians to actually, you know, be successful? What are your opinions of how what's happening in the industry right now?
I think definitely the inability to do live shows has negatively impacted musicians in a profound manner. I mean, so many musicians get the majority of their income from live shows. And obviously, like, live stream concerts are a thing, but they generally don't rake in as much income. And streaming, like Spotify streaming, you can get 1,000 streams and you don't even get $1 for it. So streaming platforms really don't give you any kind of monetary income. You need like an obscene amount of streams. And at that point, if you're getting that many streams, you're usually getting most of your money from CD sales and stuff anyways. You know, I doubt that Taylor Swift is getting most of her income from streaming.
Yeah, and the problem is like even the big artists like Taylor are not getting the CD sales they got 10 years ago.
Right.
And the physical media sales are so down. Is this streaming it's kind of like the radio, which, like, you know, way college radio would give you a way to get a band like REM from IRS to Warner Brothers because they finally got a big audience and then they were able to get the better deal. But it is touring. I mean, even back in the day, you know, IRS Records, SST, all the bands I loved, like Black Flag, who's to do, they were touring in little Econoline vans
Yeah.
all across the country, barely getting through, and then they'd have to get picked up by Warner's or some other big label
Right.
to actually get out there. And I guess the Spotify's and the SoundClouds and the whole media gets you out there, and maybe it gets you so that you can get your merch out there. You can sell more. You make more money selling T-shirts or posters than your album.
Yeah.
And I think as a musician, that's very disheartening that our art can't actually just cut it on the art itself. You have to, do sync licensing and merch and all this other stuff to actually make money.
Yeah, I mean, when selling one T-shirt is 5 times more than what you get from 1 year of streaming from a platform, it is definitely disheartening. And it's good that they exist, and it's definitely a great tool for expanding your audience and growing. But in terms of surviving and being able to buy food and pay rent, it really doesn't come through.
Yeah, it just seems like there should be a new, and I think it kind of happened with Napster, because there was a time period where the labels and the record companies were really cleaning up, and CDs got to the point where they were selling for $18 to $20.
Yeah.
And the record labels kind of burned out the audience. They kind of ripped them off, and then they kind of opened it up that music should be free, and then suddenly the people who pay for it are the musicians.
Right. Yeah.
When it's the labels, they kind of maybe messed that up. But and now they don't seem to find a way to actually adequately compensate for art.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just that you got to find different ways, because like you look at like what's going on is like kids today are more willing to buy an Xbox game for $60 or a PlayStation game for $60 than pay $10 for a physical CD from their favorite band.
Sure.
See, that's what's interesting too, is even that industry is actually changing to where they're doing like streaming services for video games now, where you don't have to go out and buy a video game. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to like graphic designers and stuff too, because their stuff is kind of same thing starting to happen to them as musicians.
Yeah, the whole industry is starting to really change.
Yeah, I mean, when that what happens is like the day one stuff is still expensive, and then maybe you get a streaming service, you get a free download, but they're trying to keep exclusive content at that tier where you've got at least downloading, you still got to pay a download.
Right.
But it's just a matter of like, as a musician, like finding new ways to get your music into vehicles that have a higher pay.
Well, that's the thing. It's really just about adapting and finding new ways. Like, don't remember don't forget how it used to be done. Like, you still need to do those things with like street teams and with connecting with people and with getting your music out there, but you have to adapt. Like, that's just kind of part of business, adapting to
you get your music into the video game. You get your music onto the sync licensing. You do like jingles for advertising. As an electronic musician, it's easier for me to do like a 30-second jingle and sell that and get more money from that than any of my ghost songs.
Yeah.
But it's as a musician, okay, well, I'm a working musician, figure it out. But it would be cool if you could actually get your band to make that money.
Yeah, especially in a world where it's really not required to be signed to a label anymore. You have so many musicians who are just fully independent, including us. I mean, we're not signed, and they find a way to be successful, but it's also saturated the market so much more because now people are like, oh, I don't need to get signed to a label to do music. I can just do it. So there are a lot more people coming in, and they're kind of flooding all these different avenues and platforms. So it can be a little bit more competitive.
Yeah. And then I think you got to be willing to like see where you can go, like as a musician, you kind of open yourself up. Okay, I'll do some sync licensing. Hey, this small label wants to do a small 3-song EP with me. Maybe I'll just do an exclusive deal with them for these 3 songs out of my catalog.
Yeah.
And then I still indie on the rest of my stuff might all be on Bandcamp, or I'm running it all by myself. But you can kind of, because you're running your own career, you can make decisions where you don't have to be exclusive. You can kind of go here, you can go there, you can do this and do that, be open to working with people, produce other people, show up on other people's records. I mean, there's a lot of ways to kind of navigate it.
Exactly.
You just have to be willing to kind of, well, maybe I'm not going to be Axl Rose. I'm not going to be Van Halen. I'm not going to break it like, Nirvana. I'm not going to hit that level, and be willing to kind of like, I'm going to feel comfortable with the level of success that I'm at, but I'm always striving. But there's a lot of people that I started that unless they could reach MTV, then they gave up
Right.
after like 2 years, and they was like, I'm done. And I see that today. I don't think people do that. I've seen bands just keep on going.
Yeah.
And I think that's very heartening, because then if you like somebody's music, then they're still around.
Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of bands too. They'll make one album and they're done. So if you can kind of prove yourself to your fans, once your fans can see that you're invested in what you do and that you're not going anywhere, they'll invest back.
And it's definitely nice to see, like, being in New York, there's so much artistry here, and we've connected with so many bands, and a lot of them have been around for at least a decade, maybe more, and they never got big and famous, but it's really great to see that they're so committed just to doing music and being artists that they don't really care if they're making millions of dollars or not. They just love it for the music, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, you get bands like, some of the bands like Liz Phair. I mean, she doesn't make super big money, but she's been around for like 30 years.
Right.
Juliana Hatfield. I've been following her forever. And I was thinking, you don't have to reach the pinnacle. I mean, Bob Mould with Who's to Do. I mean, he's been around forever.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy I followed, since I was a teenager, and he's hit certain levels of success. And Dave Grohl knows them, and he hangs out with them, and he's like an ambassador of like punk.
Yeah.
But you can kind of reach a level in the industry if you just choose to stay involved. That if you stay in your peer group and you keep on plugging at it, you can still get there.
Yeah, for sure. You just got to keep going at it. And once again, like Jack said, like lots of bands will release an album and then they kind of disappear off the radar or they break up. So kind of once you prove to your fan base that you're not going anywhere and that you're going to keep being a band and keep producing content, then they love you more because they say, oh, this band isn't breaking up anytime soon. They're going to keep making music.
So I was looking at your on Spotify, and I was looking at the release you have there. That is your album Break Free
from
2019. Are you working on a follow-up to that right now? Or are you working on singles, or what could your fans like? We can talk about that album, but I just wonder for 2020 where you're going.
Our second album, Renegade, which has 12 songs on it, comes out on August 1st, and it goes up for pre-sale on iTunes on July 1st.
Cool. If you have that pre-sale link, you maybe send it to me. I can put it up on the podcast.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can talk about Break Free in 2019 and what you wanted to kind of convey with this album.
Yeah, I mean, Break Free came out on May 26th of 2019 last year. And actually, when I had met Jack, I already had maybe like 8 of the songs already written. And I kind of came to him and I was like, hey, like, I'm wanting to do broadly rock music. I just want to create something that people haven't heard before. And we kind of got together, and I think the album was more us learning how to work together as 2 new musicians forming a band. Whereas our second album has kind of shown how we've come together as a unit rather than 2 people who are just meeting each other and learning how to work together.
So you brought songs that you'd already had kind of in the can to the project?
Yeah, I mean, I do everything in the band except the drums. So whenever I make a song, I write everything for it, kind of record a little demo for it and send it to Jack. So it was more or less the same either way. I just had already had a few songs that I already knew I wanted going on the album.
Cool. And so you even have some of the drums like you put down like with like electronic drum machines, or like however you put the rhythm tracks down.
I usually don't touch the drums. If I want like a certain sound for drums, I'll say like, hey, like I want a hip hop part here. I want a breakdown here. And, he'll take it. And Jack does like hundreds of takes for each of our songs.
Yeah, we actually record drums last.
Yeah, we do drums last.
Oh, so you'll just totally just have your rhythm guitars and maybe some keyboards or bass lines, but no percussion at all.
No, when I record a demo, I'll do my vocal, I'll do guitar, bass, piano, like I'll do all the instruments that I'm planning to have in the song, but I leave out the drums because that's Jack's thing, and then he'll do his takes.
Drums can really mess up anybody. Like the drums aren't really part of the story. They more or less support the story. If I wanted to be, a crazy drummer doing crazy stuff, then I should do instrumental music, but I want to work with a vocalist. Mm-hmm. So the vocals are the story. and the melodies that go along with those vocals are also a part of the story. So really, drums are there to back up, to enhance, and to fill in any maybe small gaps to where, you know, those certain instruments don't fill. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always, you know, I've kind of become in a different situation. I'm like a one person band, so I end up doing like everything
Sure.
in front of drums. But I've been in bands where I had a real drummer, but I was kind of like my one of my role models was like Pete Townsend, and he would actually put down drums on all the Who songs, but he knew Keith Moon wasn't really gonna keep anything he did.
Mm-hmm.
He just kind of had it as a, this is kind of like a bare bones example the way I want the song to be. But of course, I know that you're a drummer and I'm not, so you're gonna take that part and you're gonna totally rework it.
Yeah, no, when I met Jack, I was very upfront with him. I was like, "You're a drummer. I'm not going to boss you around. Our band is a democracy. And when I give you a song, I want you to make what you think sounds best to it. We can talk about it afterwards, but I'm never going to tell you what to do, at least initially." So I purposefully never send him like ideas for drums until he's worked at it a few times because he needs to be able to express himself as a musician.
Yeah, that's interesting because I haven't had a lot of discussions with bands that have drummers that have your kind of methodology.
Sure.
I've worked with a lot of bands where, you know, the people kind of had rhythms and then the drummer kind of reworked it, or does what they think is best, but they had like rhythm tracks.
and that's okay, but then at that point, the drummer's not really being allowed to actually be a musician.
Well,
Like,
I think it was more like a demo, and then the
yeah,
drummer could take it over and just like, we'll throw that out. They don't have to keep it. But
yeah. Once you hear something though, it gets stuck in your head. Like,
Yeah.
you think they even hearing it
oh,
kind of
it's horrible. It's awful. I have bands,
pollutes.
when bands want to work with me possibly as like a ghostwriting drummer, I'm like, listen, if you want to work with me and you want my sound, I don't want to hear drums. I'm like, as soon as I hear a drum part, it's in my head, and
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll be influenced instantly by it.
so it pollutes your process. So you get to the point where I don't want to hear it at all because it's just I'm gonna end up taking a piece of it.
Yeah, like once I feel like I've gotten everything out that I need to, sometimes just for my own entertainment, I'll be like, hey, send me what you got. You know, let me see if it's similar. Let me see if I'm anywhere close, just for my own entertainment. But it definitely it pollutes the ears a lot.
That's a really cool process. That's something I'm keeping in mind. Because I think like people need to understand, you know, that's one of the things I love talking to different musicians is like you every time you talk to like, you know, a bass player or a pianist or a vocalist, you get like a different take on, you know, how people work. And
Sure.
what you guys have told me is very interesting because, you
Yeah,
know,
I mean,
all
cross
a lot of the
contamination
people
is
I've
definitely
talked
a
to.
huge issue. Like even for me, people will always ask me like, what bands do you listen to? And it kind of reverts back to the whole what are your influences thing is I don't specifically listen to people because I already know, okay, I heard this artist, I like them. Like inadvertently, subconsciously, when I'm creating guitar parts, I'm gonna make parts that sound like that because I heard a song that I liked, you know. So whenever we're kind of in the writing process, I specifically don't really listen to anybody else's music because cross contamination is a thing. You know, if you hear it, whether you're aware of it or not, you're going to make something that's derived from that.
Well, yeah, I mean, just as a musician, you know, whether you're listening or not, you might pull out of your subconscious something that was just there.
Right.
That can like I listen to jazz so much that, you know, a lot of people will say, well, you're pulling like Coltrane lines, and I subconsciously don't even realize I'm pulling some Sun Ra or something just because it's been in my head
Right.
for so long that when I play, I have a tendency to bring some kind of phrasing that might be in that zone. That I'm pulling any exact song, but maybe the way they play, like that style. And so sometimes it just happens. And if you're, like you said, if you're listening to something too close, then you are going to bring it in. One thing I find kind of maddening is I get all kinds of requests that come through, and they're coming from these like agencies looking for music, and they're always pinning down a very exact sound.
Yeah.
They're saying sound like this band, this exact song, these exact bars. They want, you know, the people in the industry want other musicians to clone people exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Which if that happens organically and somebody wants that, then great. Like I'm glad our music's super relatable and that you can relate to it and that it flows along with what you already like. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's just interesting that there are people in the industry that are wanting, maybe why we see so many clone sounds is the industry itself is demanding that a lot of artists that actually, find a way to get into the business are actually, that's what they do every day.
Well, they're looking at money. They see that something is successful and that it got big, and they say, okay, we want more of that. So they look for artists who are like, hey, we want you to do exactly this because this happened and it made millions of dollars. It becomes more of a business thing, and that's again relating back to labels and people who hire, as they're in it for the money and the business perspective.
Yeah, I think that's why I tend to talk to indie bands rather than like the bigger commercial bands.
Sure.
Just because I think the industry is kind of, like you said, if you hit a drum, it's kind of polluting the environment. And I've been always somebody, I want to hear where things are going. And that's why, in the independent world of musicians, you'll hear all this new stuff, all this cross genre type of music that's going on. And if you just listen to, the Billboard, you won't hear that. You've got to dive a little deeper into, different corners of the web and social media where you hear a lot of these bands that are really kind of like what I used to hear on college radio.
Yeah.
I used to actually do college radio when I went to Burton College. I was a DJ on the radio, and I used to always be pushing all the, the alternative bands at that time, or what they would say, college radio bands, like the Replacements and Husker Du and SST bands, just because that's not what I heard on the radio.
Right.
And so in the scene that you guys are in, do you still have radio stations in New York that are playing that kind of stuff? Is everything just on the web?
Yeah, there are also online like web radio stations, but there's definitely like regular rock radio and whatnot. We actually just got played on one a few weeks ago, and they did an album review of us live as well. That was awesome.
Was it like a college radio or type of station, or just an indie radio station?
We've had college radios play us. The one that we were on a few weeks ago is called Radio Free Brooklyn. I believe that they're just a regular radio site, right? They're not affiliated with college. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool that they still have that, because that's kind of like the bones of where I grew up is listening to those type of stations.
Yeah, for sure.
Is really where you get inspired. As a musician, I really, get keyed off when I hear something that's like not popular. I was like, well, that's what I want to hear.
Right.
And get drawn to it and try to get it to be popular. But so you guys, like, you're working on this album, this second album, what's the target date for your second release?
Our second album is coming out August 1st. It's actually already finished. It's set. It's ready to go. We're working on our third album now.
Oh, wow. So you're already on to the third.
Yeah.
You guys have a work ethic.
Yes, I try to be at least 2 or 3 albums ahead of myself. So I do have a few songs toward the 4th and 5th, but we don't talk about it yet.
Well, that's interesting, because some bands had the habit, back in the day, like they do a record, they tour, they take a break, you might not see an album for 3 years.
Yeah, it's pretty standard for a band to take like 3, 4, or 5 years between each album just for writing and doing shows and stuff. But I mean, I've been writing since I was 12, and I've written over 1,000 songs. So my mind just it just never stops. I'm writing almost every day.
Yeah, so you got more material. You're not like some bands have a hard time getting, enough material together to actually complete a project.
Sure.
It seems to be like something that they have to really work hard at, and then other people are just like, they're like a Prince or something. They got like 10,000 songs in the vault.
Yeah.
So you're more of the person that you're continually working, and you have more than what you can actually put out.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely consider quality over quantity. I write for cathartic value. It helps me get out negative emotions. So I have a ton of songs, but I most likely will never use the majority of them just because I wrote them just for the sake of writing and getting my feelings out.
Oh, so you kind of have a whole back catalog, but I think a lot of artists will have this vault, and then it's their own personal vault, and they can go back into it, and then they'll say, well, yeah, this thing I did like last week, or this thing I did 2 years ago, if I kind of look back at it, maybe I can put it with this song and that song, and then you actually have a project and you can pull out like the best of what you've been working on, and nobody ever gets to it except your own group of people that your bandmates or your producers. That's interesting. So is that kind of describing what you do?
There's definitely potential for that in the future. Usually when I write a song, I write a brand new song. I don't really pull from previous things that I did, because whenever I write about something that I'm going through or something that I'm feeling. So it's present emotion. If I ever do slow down creatively, obviously, yeah, I have a huge song bank that I can look back in and grab resources from. But right now, my mind is still going a million miles a minute, so I have no need to do that.
Yeah, I think this interesting when you do that. I mean, just as I've gotten older, I'm in my 50s, and sometimes if I go back like 5 years or 10 years into my back catalog, I find things I'm like, wow, I never really finished that.
Yeah.
And that was really cool. So I actually go back to a song I did like 5 years ago, and then go at it again and say, wow, now I feel comfortable putting this out. Because I kind of completed the thought. I mean, it's something that over time as a musician, you decide if you want, if that makes sense to you, wherever you are. And different musicians, different points in their career, they're where they are.
Yeah, for sure. Never say never.
Yeah, it's just kind of cool that you have your own resource. You don't have to go to like Fruity Loops and grab some.
No.
Please no.
No. Please no. No.
Yeah.
No, and even sometimes like just looking, like if I have creative block, if I read a couple old songs of mine, I'll get inspired, and I won't base my new song off of those, but it gives me an idea. So, it's kind of useful just having the song bank there to know like, hey, you've written over 1,000 songs. You can write another one. This is not it.
Yeah. It's just cool to have that, that resource that you have that. To be able to go back to, and there's all these stories of musicians pulling things from different periods. I was just I'm a big Neil Young fan, and he had this album that just came back out that he never put out because it was like too personal.
Mm-hmm.
It was about a breakup he had with a famous actress, and he never put it out because it was like the songs were about that breakup.
Right.
And Neil Young's a guy that really puts out stuff that's emotional. I mean, the album he put out instead was Tonight's the Night, which is a very emotional, like, bearing album.
Sure.
But the album they didn't put out was about a personal relationship with his partner that he had a child with, and he felt the songs were too personal. And they come to find out that one of the songs that was on that album he put out as Crazy Horse, as this really grunged up punkish song. And then on the album just came out is the Harvest kind of bluegrass slide guitar version of the song.
Sure.
A song called White Lines, and there's a Crazy Horse version of White Lines, and then there's a Harvest type of version of White Lines. And so it's like, wow, these are totally diametrically opposed. It's the same song, but one of them's kind of punk,
right?
The other one's pure acoustic. And one that was written about a breakup, and the other one's kind of like, oh, this kind of grunged out thing. And you're like, wow, that's like interesting to see, what songwriters do with their material.
Absolutely.
But that's just a story. But so what are your plans to move your art in 2020 and 2021? How are you going to proceed with the way the world is today? What are you thinking you need to do?
I mean, we're going to keep creating. We have no intentions of slowing down anytime soon. We're going to keep, investing in our fan base and just growing our band as a whole. We grow very organically. We're independent. So a lot of our fans are great. They share our content and help us expand. But, once things start opening back up, we're definitely going to start setting dates for a national tour and try to play all over the U.S. and grow our fan base from there as well.
Yeah, we're actually even currently trying to set up street teams in every state so that we have people to get information from as far as, what the best venues are at the moment, especially with so many closing down. Mm-hmm. It's going to be very important to know which ones are still open, which ones maybe are new, or,
what local bands should we reach out to? We've also been doing live stream concerts in the meantime. We have one coming up on July 1st to celebrate the pre-sale of our second album, which comes out August 1st, by the way. But yeah, we've been doing live stream concerts on like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And those have been really fun. So, you know, people are kind of stuck at home right now and they want to see a concert, but everywhere is closed. So they've been coming to our shows online, and it's been really nice.
Yeah, I actually, my booker actually told me that there's like an opportunity to do live streams that go to like European and Asian audiences to actually pay.
Yeah.
And so those are getting, more, they're increasing all the time. There's more and more of them getting set up because the venues are realizing they're like, well, we're not gonna be able to open until 2021.
Right.
And they need to find ways to get something going. So some of them are starting to associate with these live stream companies and capabilities. So yeah, I do think when some of the venues come back, some of the ones that we knew might not come back, and then there'll be brand new ones.
Right.
That we don't even know what they are. And so, yeah, the world's going to be a little bit different when we get back, to normal. But I think everybody's just got to, keep on pushing and be, willing to, try new things and see the way things go. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation happening.
For sure.
And I think that's like cool to look forward to in terms of being a musician. Just realize like, you might have been doing this for, so many years, doing it a certain way, but now, we're in a kind of watershed moment for the world we're in. And as musicians, I think we got to be willing to look at every opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, music and art always rises to the top after tragedy. Art, music always comes kind of as a phoenix to a tragic event, and it's, it won't disappear. It can always come out stronger.
It might come out different, but it's not going to go away.
Do you find yourself writing in material that kind of reflects what's going on in the current state of society, or are you kind of still writing the way you would have wrote last year? Do you feel that you're writing songs that reflect the times, or you feel, well, I'm still writing songs the way I always write songs?
I mean, again, I always write songs based on what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and, my personal experience. So it's a little bit of both. I mean, I'm still writing the same way, but inadvertently, because of what's happening right now, my writing is being affected by that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that there's a lot of musicians that maybe didn't write about like things that are more political or maybe more social, and it's kind of creeping into their work where I hadn't seen it before. And so that's interesting. And I think it's a good sign of actually maybe getting a deeper type of singer-songwriter level work. You kind of work, that I grew up with like guys like Carole King and Neil Young and Bob Dylan and the Doors, like song albums that were like album oriented.
Right.
Themes that were kind of very personal, like, Dylan's Tangled Up in Blue or Idiot Wind, songs, that had, Tonight's the Night, that they're very deep, personal, emotional songs that people wrote because they felt like they weren't trying to make $1 million. They were feeling pain, and they reflected it in their art, and the people came to them because they felt something in the song.
Yeah.
That's always been something I've been hoping would come back in music, and I see it starting to creep back in a little more and more. But there seems to have been a period where that kind of fell off a little bit, but it seems to be coming back.
Yeah, different kinds of music, like rock comes in and out of style, country comes in and out of style, but every type of music and every type of musician has waves where they'll be more or less popular. And it's, I do think in like the 2010s, we had more of like the dance scene crowd became more popular. It was more about pop beats and club beats and stuff. But now it's definitely starting to revert back into what it was maybe in the early 2000s.
No, even in the genres that are dance oriented, people are starting to realize that they maybe should have some social commentary.
Right.
And so I think I think all the genres are going to get a deeper feeling when you have such, catastrophic things that are going on. Even if you're a dance band, you might make a political dance song, or a song that has like social impact in a genre that maybe doesn't see that. That I think that's that kind of very, I think it's something to look forward to, that people being, having a little more depth in what they do.
Yeah, I think people being more genuine and just open about who they are as people it's definitely on the rise, and I'm looking forward to seeing what different artists create.
Cool. So I'm going to put this out on 11 platforms. If you didn't know, Anchor is part of Spotify. And so we're on Spotify podcast as well as Apple and 9 other platforms. So I will send you the top platform links from Spotify, Anchor, and Apple.
Awesome.
And maybe Radio Public as well. And this will go out within an hour. And in addition, it can become on my social media, I will push it out as a highlight on my Instagram, which will go directly to the Spotify link.
That sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and let everybody know, like, even if you don't have Spotify, you can listen to Spotify podcast for free.
Yeah.
And so this can be, some people don't realize, well, I don't have Spotify, so they won't listen to it, but you don't have to be a Spotify member to listen to a Spotify podcast.
Right.
So this will be there. So that link can go to anybody.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for being on the show. And every band that we've ever had on, we've had on bands multiple times. So when your new album is ready to drop, let us know. We could have an album release podcast and talk about it.
That sounds great.
That'd be perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great night.
You too.
And you guys stay safe out there and keep on writing, keep on doing what you're doing.
You as well. Thank you
Talk to
so
you
much.
soon.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.